I stood in the cold stone dressing room, the harsh white light catching the red lipstick smeared on her collar. I whispered, "Stepmother beat me," but my father only adjusted his tie, as if I'd commented on the weather. "We're late," he said. The moment the doors opened, I decided that tonight, no one would leave this gala the same way they arrived. My name is Lauren Middleton. I am 28 years old, and by profession, I am a legal risk consultant. Tonight, however, I was not a consultant. I was standing backstage at the Whitney Conservatory Gala in Denver, reduced to the role of a daughter, waiting in the wings. The dressing room was a cold, echoing corridor of gray stone and humming fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the competing smells of aerosol hairspray and the faint, dry dust of old velvet curtains. I stood behind the heavy drape that separated this functional staging area from the grand ballroom, listening to the rising murmur of Denver's philanthropic elite. My dress was a statement of absence, minimalist, severe black. It was a necessary canvas for the night's work. My gaze was fixed, not on the door, but on a point on the marble floor, calculating the minutes ahead. My father, Graham Whitlow, stood 2 feet away, angled toward a tall, silver-framed mirror. As the president of the Whitlow Transit Group, he commanded boardrooms, shipping routes, and government contracts. But here, in this narrow, brightly lit space with me, he was a man trapped in a single, repetitive motion, adjusting his charcoal-colored silk tie, his fingers smoothed fabric that was already flawless. He was performing composure, and in doing so, he managed to avoid my eyes. He refused to look at me. The door to the outside hallway hissed open, and the atmosphere in the small room instantly compressed. Camille Roth swept in, my father's wife, the executive director of the Glass Lantern Fund. She was a vision of civic grace, poured into an emerald silk gown that whispered against the stone floor, but it was her scent that arrived before her. An overwhelming cloud of sharp bergamot and something metallic, a perfume that didn't just enter a room but conquered it, smothering the air, demanding submission. She smiled, a bright, surgically precise expression aimed directly at my father, deliberately cutting me out of her line of sight as if I were furniture. "Graham, darling, they're waiting for us," she said, her voice as smooth and cold as chilled vodka. She turned then, a flawless pivot, pretending to notice me for the first time. "Oh, Lauren, you're here." Her tone suggested my presence was a minor, unexpected logistical issue. She moved toward me, the smile tightening at the corners, and reached out as if for a familiar, step-maternal touch of reassurance. Her hand, adorned with a heavy sapphire that matched her eyes, clamped down on my right wrist. It was not a pat. It was not a squeeze. It was a vice, a sharp, punishing grip intended only for me, a silent assertion of power, a reminder of her dominance just moments before the curtain rose. Pain, bright and shocking, shot up my arm from the pressure of her fingernails digging into my skin. It was the same grip she had used in the car on the way over, when I'd questioned the evening's speaking order, the same one she used in the kitchen when the household staff wasn't looking, a proprietary, casual violence. I did not flinch. I did not pull away. I simply waited, my expression unchanged, until she released me to step past, moving to my father's side. I lifted my arm slightly, rotating my hand under the harsh white fluorescent light. The skin was already blooming, a dark, angry red welt forming just above the bone, a fresh bruise, stark and undeniable against my pale skin. I looked at my father. He was watching us now, his face a perfect mask of neutral impatience. He had seen the grip. He saw the mark it left. "Stepmother beat me," I whispered. My voice was flat and hard as sheet steel. It was not an accusation, not a plea for help. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same clinical detachment I would use to report a variance in a legal audit. I was not asking him to save me. I was diagnosing the sickness in the room. I was showing him the symptom, right there, under the bright lights of his precious gala. For one agonizing, Suspended second, the room held its breath. I watched my father's gaze drop from my eyes, flicker to the red lipstick smeared on Camille's collar, my lipstick, transferred when she'd pulled me close for that false, theatrical embrace moments before, and then, finally, drop to the angry, rising bruise on my wrist. He saw it, he registered it, he understood it, and he made his choice. His eyes snapped back to his own reflection in the mirror. He gave his perfect charcoal tie one final, definitive tug. "We're late," he said. The words were clipped, final, an executioner's sentence on truth itself. He was not speaking to me, or even to Camille. He was speaking to the schedule. He was speaking to the 500 donors waiting in the ballroom, to the photographers poised at the entrance, to the board members whose opinions mattered more than his own blood. He was telling me, in the clearest language he had left, that my truth, my pain, my physical reality did not exist if it conflicted with the public perception of the Whitlow name. Camille's smile returned, this time genuine, edged with the sharp, metallic taste of triumph. She had won this skirmish. She had been validated. But I had not been fighting a skirmish. I had been waiting, patiently, for the signal to declare a war. In that moment, as my father turned his back on me completely to offer his arm to his wife, I recognized this for what it was. This was not just another dismissal in a lifetime of them. This was the final test. This was the last time I would stand in the shadows and allow their pristine reputation to be built upon my silence. They were, both of them, willing to sacrifice me, one last time, on the altar of public relations. My left hand tightened on the small black clutch I carried. It felt impossibly heavy, not with the usual contents of an evening bag, but with the dense, cold weight of armor. Inside, nestled against the silk lining, was the arsenal I had spent months assembling, a simple, matte black USB drive containing encrypted spreadsheets, falsified shipping manifests, and flagged bank transfers that proved the Glass Lantern Fund was nothing but a hollow shell, a small, cold, safe deposit key, procured from a source I would protect at all costs, and a fake, but perfectly laminated Lantern Employee ID, crafted to get me past the first layer of security at a warehouse across town. This was the evidence, not of a bruised wrist, that was just the punctuation mark, the final insult, but of systemic, calculated, million-dollar fraud. From the ballroom, the sound of violins tuning suddenly resolved into the opening bars of a crisp Vivaldi piece. It was no longer music, it was a timer, a countdown. Through the gap in the curtain, I could see the popping, predatory glare of camera flashes, strobing against the enormous backdrop covered in the logos of corporate sponsors. The largest logo, centered at the very top, was the stylized, glowing emblem of the Glass Lantern. Below it, in solid, dependable block letters, was the insignia of the Whitlow Transit Group. I thought of the email that had started this. It had arrived 3 weeks ago, anonymous, simple, and terrifying. The lantern is just a shell. They don't ship relief. They ship air. Follow the night trucks. The night trucks, my father's trucks. The pieces had clicked into place with a sickening cold precision. The charity Camille's celebrated passion project was a front. The millions raised for disaster relief, for families stranded in the mountains, for children needing medical supplies after the spring blizzards, were vanishing. The money was collected. Goods were purchased on paper, and Whitlow Transit was contracted at an inflated rate to deliver them, but the trucks were running light, or diverting to private warehouses, their contents sold on the black market. The charity money, clean and blessed by the public, was being laundered, disappearing on those night shipments. I could have gone to the police. As a risk consultant, it was my first, logical instinct. But I knew how this world worked. I knew my father's lawyers. I knew Camille's political connections. It would be buried. It would be dismissed as an internal accounting error, a minor logistical snag. They would issue a press release, fire a low-level dispatcher, and the machine would grind on, untouched. No, They built their reputations in the spotlight. They would be dismantled in it. I wanted this stage, the one they had so carefully constructed. I wanted the 500 wealthiest, most influential people in Denver, the very donors they were bleeding dry, to be in the room when the first crack appeared in the facade. I wanted them to see the rot for themselves. My father and Camille were moving toward the curtain, ready for their grand entrance. He paused, holding the velvet drape aside for her. My phone, clutched in my hand with the bag, vibrated once, a single, sharp buzz against my palm. I glanced down at the screen, shielding it with my body. A new message. The sender was listed only as anonymous, identified by the small, pixelated icon of a broken lantern. It was my source, my partner in this. The message was 5 words. Warehouse 7 open, 10:15 p.m. 10:15. I checked the small, elegant clock on the dressing room wall. It was just past 8. The timeline was locked. The trap was baited. "Lauren, now," my father called over his shoulder, his voice tight with irritation. The master of ceremonies was beginning his introduction, his voice booming artificially through the speakers. I took a deep breath, the cold, perfume-saturated air filling my lungs. I pushed away the sting on my wrist. I pushed away the image of my father's averted gaze. The pain sharpened my focus, honing it into a fine, cold blade. Camille and Graham stepped through the curtain to a sudden, bright burst of applause. The light from the ballroom flooded the dark corridor, catching them in a perfect golden halo. The philanthropist and the industrialist, the perfect couple. I waited 3 beats. Then, I squared my shoulders and followed them out onto the red carpet. I felt the immediate, suffocating heat of the stage lights, the sudden, intrusive glare of a dozen cameras turning my way. I felt the eyes of the 500 guests settle on me, the quiet daughter, the accessory in black. I smiled. It was a serene, pleasant smile, the one I had practiced in that same mirror my father had used, the one that belonged at a gala. My left hand, the one holding the clutch full of evidence, remained steady at my side. My other hand, the one with the fresh, throbbing bruise. I lifted slowly. I did not hide it. I did not flaunt it. I simply let my fingers trail lightly, almost thoughtfully, over the mark on my wrist, a silent acknowledgement, a promise. The hunt had begun, and this was the opening move. The smile I wore on that red carpet was a piece of armor I had started forging years ago. Back in Fort Collins, our house there was all glass and exposed pine, smelling of resin and the cold, sharp air that blew down from the foothills. It was a house defined by what was missing. My mother had been gone since I was 12, her car found in a ravine off a mountain road during a late spring thaw. The official report called it an accident, a tragic loss of control on a patch of unseen ice. What I remember most isn't the grief itself, but the suffocating, heavy silence that followed. A silence my father, Graham Whitlow, curated as if it were a fragile piece of art. We never spoke of her. We never spoke of the ice, the ravine, or the emptiness at the dinner table. Life was to be managed, not felt. 18 months later, that management took a new form. Camille Roth entered our silent, pine-scented home, and the first thing she did was replace the air. My mother's faint, lingering scent of lavender and old books was power-washed away by the aggressive, citrus and spice sting of bergamot. Camille was, to the public, a flawless specimen. She was the glowing, compassionate socialite, featured in Denver magazines for her charity work even before she took the Whitlow name, in private, behind the heavy, custom-milled oak doors of our house. She was a creature of sharp angles and surgical precision. She was the one who inspected the housekeeper's work with a white-gloved finger, the one whose voice never rose but could cut a person down with a single, whispered observation. Her arrival coincided with the explosive growth of my father's company. The Whitlow Transit Group wasn't just a trucking business. It was a domestic logistics empire. Graham had built it from a regional carrier into a behemoth that held the most lucrative government contracts in the state. When a blizzard shut down the high country, it was Whitlow trucks, emblazoned with our family name in bold, dependable blue, that transported the emergency relief, the food, and the medical supplies. The company's brand was reliability. Its motto was, "We deliver, always." In our home, that motto was twisted. We did not deliver truth. We did not deliver confrontation. We delivered appearances. Our family life was governed by the same principles as a corporate press release. All conflicts were smoothed over, not by resolution, but by scheduling and public relations. Was I failing a class? It was a temporary academic misalignment that was being handled with private tutors, ensuring no word of it reached the preparatory school's parent council. Was my father pulling away, working 70-hour weeks? He was securing the Western supply chain, a fact Camille would proudly relate at dinner parties I was expected to sit through, silent and composed. Camille installed her one, unwritten law, and it became the constitution of our new family. Thou shalt do nothing to create a bad magazine cover. Our lives were a performance for an unseen, critical audience. I learned to survive in this new ecosystem. I stopped trying to break the silence because I learned it was, in fact, an excellent place to hide. I became an observer. I learned to read the tension in my father's jaw, the slight flare of Camille's nostrils before she delivered a private rebuke, the way the staff's shoulders tightened when she entered a room. I learned to read their true intentions not in their faces, but in their reflections, in the polished black granite of the kitchen island, the silver gleam of a serving tray, or the dark, accusing screen of the television in the living room after it was turned off. In a mirror, their expressions were unguarded for a fraction of a second. Silence became my armor, my laboratory, and my shield. When I graduated from college, my father, in a rare moment of what he likely perceived as paternal guidance, gave me a job in the internal audit department of Whitlow Transit. "Learn the books, Lauren," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder, the gesture both proprietary and unfamiliar. "This will all be yours one day." I did learn the books. I learned them better than he knew. I was good at it. I found patterns where others saw noise, and in my 6th month, I found the first one. It was small, almost undetectable, a discrepancy of 3%. It was in the manifests for humanitarian aid shipments, the very snowstorm relief that built our company's benevolent reputation. The numbers on the shipping orders, the ones billed to the state and to the charities, did not perfectly match the final inventory logs from the destination warehouses. 3% of the highest value items, usually pharmaceuticals and specialized equipment, were listed as spoilage or lost in transit. 3%, over and over, always on the same routes, always from the same originating warehouse. I flagged it. I wrote a quiet professional report, detailing the variance and recommending a cross-check of the driver logs. I submitted it to my supervisor and, as protocol dictated, copied my father's office. The response was not a request for a follow-up. It was a summons. I was transferred out of the internal audit department by the end of the day. The official, emailed reason was a potential family conflict of interest that could compromise the integrity of the audit. The unofficial reason came from my father, in his glass-walled corner office overlooking the Denver skyline. He didn't invite me to sit. He stood by the window, the setting sun catching the gray in his hair, making him look like a statue of a statesman. "I read your report," he said, his back to me. "It's thorough." "It's accurate," I replied, my voice steady. 3% is not a rounding error. Dad, it's a pattern. He turned, and his face was not angry. It was worse. It was disappointed, tinged with a weary pity that made my stomach clench. "You're too emotional for this industry. Lauren," he said, as if that explained everything. "You see a number on a page and you think it's a story. It's not. It's just a number. It's the cost of doing business in difficult conditions. You're confusing logistics with morality." He advised me to find a position outside the core family operations. He suggested I was better suited for something client-facing, or perhaps something in the legal field, He was dismissing me. He was telling me I had looked behind the curtain, and he was banishing me for it. So I left. I took his advice, got my credentials, and joined a prestigious external firm specializing in corporate risk, the very firm my father's company sometimes hired to clean up its messes. I learned how to trace money, how to read contracts for loopholes, and how to find the exact places where logistics and morality were deliberately and criminally separated. He had, in his attempt to sideline me, given me the very weapons I would need. The true beginning of my investigation, however, was at their wedding. It was a lavish affair, of course, a few years after I'd been pushed out of the company. It was also the official launch of Camille's Glass Lantern Fund. It was her passion project. She'd announced, funded by a generous initial donation from the Whitlow Group, designed to get aid to the forgotten children of the mountains. I was at a table near the back, sipping champagne, perfecting my smile, when I overheard a state senator at the VIP table lean toward a potential donor. "The lantern is a miracle," the senator gushed. "Camille's fund saved 100 kids in Clear Creek County last winter." The number was so specific, 100 kids. Later that evening, I wandered by the beautifully designed glass lantern display. There was a donor book, a prospectus filled with glossy photos of snow-capped peaks and smiling children. I flipped to the back, to the page listing partners and beneficiaries, the list of communities served, the list of partner organizations, the list of actual, tangible recipients. It was blank. It was just a beautifully designed template, waiting to be filled in. 100 kids, 3%. The numbers clicked in my head. A cold, hard piece of arithmetic. The cost of doing business. I stayed calm. I smiled at Camille, congratulated my father, and posed for the family photos. The perfect, supportive daughter. But that night, I went home to my own apartment and I created a secure, encrypted file system. I started small. I collected warehouse addresses from public shipping records. I took my own photos of pallet tags I saw in unsecured loading bays. I copied truck schedules and cross-referenced driver manifests. I built a shadow ledger of the Whitlow Transit Group's most charitable activities. My father and his new wife had made their choice. They had chosen the warmth and glow of the public spotlight, a spotlight fueled by a narrative of compassion. They had chosen the comfortable, profitable silence that hid the truth. I made my own silent promise, standing in the cold, blue light of my monitor. If they chose silence, I would choose light, not the warm, flattering glow of their gala, but the cold, unblinking, fluorescent light of an evidence room, the kind of light that exposes every flaw, every crack, and every stain, the kind of light that was, at this very moment, shining on my bruised wrist. To dismantle an empire, you cannot simply throw a rock at its walls. You must poison its well. You must introduce a contaminant, something that looks pure, and let it circulate until the entire system is compromised from within. My father had taught me logistics. I would teach him infiltration. The operation began with the birth of a ghost. I called it North Star Relief. I built it from the digital ground up. I needed a supplier, a donor, that was substantial enough to be taken seriously but knew enough that its lack of public history was not a red flag. I acquired a dormant shell corporation, one that had existed for 5 years and had a clean, valid employer identification number. This was the skeleton. I fleshed it out with a minimalist, professional website, all cool grays and ethical stock photos of mountainous terrain. I wrote the About Us page myself, filling it with believable, vague platitudes about supply chain solutions for high-altitude communities. I registered a domain and a virtual mailbox in Cheyenne, Wyoming, just far enough away to be respectable. Then I wrote the proposal. It was a masterpiece of corporate generosity. North Star Relief, I wrote, in a letter addressed directly to Camille Roth, was initiating a new philanthropic push. We had access to a significant surplus of high-value medical supplies, specifically portable diagnostic kits and temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals. We were prepared to make a rolling donation valued at just over $1.5 million to the Glass Lantern Fund. I included one condition, buried in the logistics section. As a new partner, we required a trial shipment to validate the integrity and security of the supply chain. A single pallet, to be transported by a Whitlow transit truck, co-monitored by our own logistics agent. The bait was too rich, the hook too small. $1 million donation in exchange for one monitored test run? It was an offer she couldn't refuse. Camille's reply came in less than 24 hours. She didn't delegate. This was too big. She invited me to the Glass Lantern offices to finalize the partnership. Her office was exactly what I expected. A monument to false transparency. It was a corner suite in a sleek glass tower overlooking Cherry Creek. The furniture all white leather and chrome. Camille sat behind a glass desk, the picture of modern philanthropy, and offered me sparkling water. "We are so thrilled by North Star's generosity," she'd said, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Your commitment to the mountain communities is inspiring." "We just want to ensure the aid gets where it's going," I said, my voice matching her sincerity. "Our trial pallet is ready to go. We've included a sample diagnostic kit in this case for your review." I slid a polished aluminum case across the glass desk. Inside, nestled in foam, was a sleek, high-tech medical device. And embedded deep within the device's casing, invisible to any inspection, was a military-grade GPS tracker, far more precise than a simple AirTag, with a battery that would last for weeks. But the tracker was just the first layer. The outside of the aluminum case was sealed with a custom-printed security tape. It featured a complex QR code that, if scanned, led to the North Star website. But its real purpose was the adhesive. It was a high-tech, tamper-evident polymer. If the seal was peeled, it would leave an irreversible, fiber-tearing void pattern. I had just handed Camille a box that would record both where it went and when it was opened. She accepted the case, her eyes gleaming at the value of the sample alone. The meeting was a success. The next step was the driver. I couldn't use a Whitlow employee, who would be loyal to my father, and I couldn't use a stranger. I used my new North Star credentials to hire a temporary transport agent through a high-end corporate security firm. I specified my needs: a logistics expert with a background in high-value cargo and loss investigation. The man they sent, Mateo, was a retired freight investigator with 20 years of experience. He understood immediately that the official paperwork was just a cover story. I told him his only job was to ride in the truck, observe, and log every single stop, official or otherwise. The trial shipment was scheduled for the following week. Mateo was on the truck, his official North Star clipboard in hand. The truck left the depot at 8 p.m. The official destination was a relief hub in Georgetown, a 2-hour drive. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Mateo. "We're stopping." I checked the live feed from the GPS tracker I had planted in the sample case. The truck wasn't in Georgetown. It wasn't even on the main highway. It had diverted to an unmarked service road, stopping at a location that didn't exist on any map, a large blank spot in an industrial park. Warehouse 7. The truck sat there for 45 minutes, the GPS signal unwavering. Then, it continued on to the actual destination in Georgetown, arriving just after midnight. Mateo's report the next morning was chilling. "They knew I was there, so they didn't offload," he said. But the driver was nervous, and 2 men in unmarked jackets met him at the stop. They looked inside the truck, saw me and the official North Star seals, and waved him on. That stop, Ms. Middleton, was the real delivery. Georgetown was the after-party. The GPS data proved the stop. The unbroken seal on my sample case proved they hadn't touched my shipment, but they had wanted to. I had the location. I now had the where, I still needed the how. The anonymous Broken Lantern source provided it. It came as a garbled, voice-modulated call from a blocked number, 2 weeks before the gala. "You're looking in the wrong banks," the electric voice rasped. "Stop looking at the Denver financials. Check the subledgers at the Clear Creek Community Bank. Get the key." The call ended. "Get the key." The anonymous source must have been the one who sent me the small, brass safe deposit key that was, at that very moment, taped inside the lining of my clutch. The Clear Creek Bank was small, local, and unassuming. I went the next day. The key, combined with a discreet flash of my risk consultant credentials, got me into the vault. The safe deposit box was not full of cash. It was full of evidence. On top was a stack of photographs. Printed on high-gloss paper, they were photos of my trial shipment's sister pallets. Pallets branded with the Glass Lantern logo. Stacked high inside a private, climate-controlled warehouse. A warehouse that was clearly not a humanitarian aid depot. These pallets were sitting next to shrink-wrapped cases of high-end electronics and designer goods, all marked for resale. Underneath the photos was a single sheet of paper. It was the articles of incorporation for a limited liability company I had never heard of. Lantern Logistics, LLC. The registered agent, the owner of the LLC, was a name I knew instantly. It was Camille's personal assistant. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just skimming. This was a dedicated, parallel operation. The entire timeline clicked into place, cold and sharp. A disaster, like a blizzard, would hit the high country. The Glass Lantern Fund would launch a massive, public-facing fundraising campaign, fronted by Camille and backed by the Whitlow name. The public and corporate donors would pour money in. The fund would purchase high-value goods, but the invoices were inflated. Whitlow transit trucks would be dispatched to deliver the aid. But before they reached the legitimate distribution centers, they would stop at Warehouse 7, the ghost facility owned by Camille's Assistants LLC. There, they would offload approximately 30% of the most valuable, untraceable items. The rest of the shipment, the remaining 70%, would proceed to the real charity hubs, providing just enough aid to generate the positive press, the photos of smiling children, and the grateful quotes from local officials. The 30% skimmed at Warehouse 7 would be repackaged and sold on the private market, and the clean profits would be funneled into the tiny, unassuming account at the Clear Creek Community Bank, under the name Lantern Logistics, LLC. It was brilliant, it was horrifying, and it was all her. I now had the complete picture. The evidence on my USB drive was no longer just a suspicion. It was a map of the entire conspiracy. I knew I couldn't just drop this on the police. Camille would burn her assistant, claim she was a rogue employee, and my father would use his influence to bury the investigation. No, the trap had to be sprung at the gala. As a major new donor, North Star Relief was given a place of honor. Camille, in a gesture of magnanimous inclusion, even invited me to offer input on her keynote speech for the gala. "You have such a clear-headed view of the logistics, Lauren," she'd said, patronizing me. "I'd love to ensure our numbers are presented in a way that would impress your partners." "I'd be happy to help, Camille," I'd replied. This was the final piece of the trap. I wrote her speech, or rather, I edited it, inserting, at her request, the golden numbers. I fed her specific, inflated statistics. I wrote that the Glass Lantern had delivered 5,000 high-altitude thermal blankets to Clear Creek County. I knew, from the real manifests, the number was closer to 2,000. I wrote that the fund had successfully processed $1.2 million in direct-to-community aid in the last quarter alone. I knew from the Clear Creek ledger that nearly $500,000 of that had been diverted to Lantern Logistics, LLC. They weren't just lies, they were my lies. Specific, verifiable falsehoods that I had personally fed to her, and which she, in her arrogance, had memorized. I had the real numbers on the USB drive in my clutch. My plan was to make her read my script of falsehoods, live, on stage, in front of 500 witnesses, creating an immediate, verifiable contradiction that I, or my allies, could expose in real time. My phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me from the memory and back to the harsh lights of the gala backstage. "Warehouse 7 open, 10:15 p.m. The text from my anonymous source, the final signal. The clock was set. 10:15. My team, led by Mateo and the inside source, would enter Warehouse 7. Not to steal anything, but to document, to film the pallets, to match the serial numbers from my fake donation report, to be the objective witnesses when the lights came on. 10:45. The data leak. Once I had confirmation they were in, I would give the signal to a trusted journalist I had planted in the audience. The first anonymous tip would be dropped, forcing the media to question the numbers. 11 o'clock. The reveal. When I or my father took the stage, the carefully constructed reality of the glass lantern would be brought crashing down. The music swelled. The time for planning was over. The time for execution was now. I couldn't build the trap alone. An investigation of this magnitude, targeting an organization as insulated as my father's, required a network. The problem was, the entire network was designed to protect him and Camille, not to expose them. I had the what and the where. I needed the who. I needed allies, and I found them in the cracks of the Whitlow empire. The first crack was Owen Park. Owen was my father's young, terrifyingly brilliant CFO. He was a data prodigy who had restructured the Whitlow Transit Group's finances in under 2 years. He was all sharp suits, sharper haircuts, and an ambition that vibrated off him. I never trusted him. I assumed he was Camille's creature, or at the very least, my father's loyal heir apparent. Then, 6 weeks before the gala, I received a one-line, encrypted email from his official work address. I have a standing order for the Stir Crazy Coffee Shop, 5 p.m., Tuesday, be there. It wasn't a request. I found him at a back table of the cafe near the Platte River, a location clearly chosen for its noise and anonymity. The air smelled of burnt beans and damp wool. He didn't look up when I arrived, his eyes fixed on a tablet. He looked pale, exhausted, and about 10 years older than he had at the last quarterly meeting. "You're making a mistake, Lauren," he said, his voice low. He still hadn't looked at me. "My mistake is being here, or the one you think I'm making. You're using North Star relief to bait her." He finally met my gaze. His was pure, cold panic. "Do you have any idea what you've walked into? You're treating this like a family dispute. This is felony fraud, wire fraud, insurance fraud, tax evasion. You're ringing a dinner bell, and you're the dinner." My blood went cold. "How do you know about North Star?" "I'm the CFO. I see every new vendor, every new donor. I saw a $1.5 million pledge from a shell company in Wyoming, and I saw your digital fingerprints all over the firewall request for its EN verification." He pushed the tablet across the table. "You're looking at the shipping manifests. You're following the trucks. You're wasting your time. That's just theft. You want the crime? Look at this." He tapped the screen. It was a list of insurance claims. "Camille is smart," Owen said, his voice bitter. "But she's also greedy. She's not just stealing the goods, she's insuring them." I scanned the data. For every shipment that was diverted to Warehouse 7, a separate, corresponding claim was filed weeks later. Lost in transit, damaged by weather, spoilage due to equipment failure. "The Whitlow Group pays the premiums," he explained. "The insurance company pays the claim for the lost goods, which are then sold on the black market. She's triple dipping. She gets the tax write-off for the initial donation. She gets the black market profit from the sale, and she gets the insurance payout." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Why haven't you stopped it?" "I tried." The word was sharp, full of broken glass. "When I first saw the numbers, I ran a flag. I blocked a transfer. The next day, I was called into a meeting, not with Graham, with Camille. She produced a document, an executive authorization, signed by my father, giving her fund total discretion over all partner logistics. She told me I was a numbers man, and I should stick to the numbers. She told me to unblock the transfer. The message was clear. This is the cost of doing business. This is how the family wants it. You think I'm part of this?" "I think you're the only one who can't be bought," he said. "I can't go to the board. I can't go to Graham. He's compromised. But I can't sign off on these financials for another quarter. I will not go to jail for her." He took a deep breath. The gala. I know you're planning something. I'm locking the system. As of 10 p.m. on the night of the gala, I'm initiating a full security audit, citing the insurance discrepancies. Camille will be locked out of the Lantern Fund accounts. You'll have exactly 1 hour before the system reboots. Whatever you're going to do it then. He was in, not out of loyalty to me, but out of self-preservation. It was the only currency I trusted. The second ally was the one who had started it all, the broken lantern. After the meeting with Owen, I sent a simple message to the anonymous email address. I know about the insurance fraud. Who are you? The reply came 2 days later. I was in your 4010 seminar, Ethics in Modern Business, DU, fall semester. I'm the one who asked you about the cost of silence. Meet me at the library. Arya Bloom. I remembered her instantly. She was quiet, whip-smart, and deeply idealistic. She had been the only student who actually seemed angered by the case studies. After she graduated, I had written her a letter of recommendation. She had, to my horror, gotten a job as a mid-level dispatch coordinator at the Whitlow Transit Group. We met in the deep, silent stacks of the university library, surrounded by the dusty smell of old paper. She was pale, just like Owen, but her eyes were burning. I'm so sorry. Professor, she whispered, clutching a stack of files to her chest. I did what you said. I saw something. So I tried to say something. I reported the manifest discrepancies to my supervisor. What happened? I was reassigned. My supervisor told me I was not seeing the big picture. He sent me to the night shift, managing the overflow routes. She opened one of her files. It was a hand-drawn map. That's when I found Warehouse 7. It's not in the system. Ms. Middleton. It's a ghost. An unmarked, insulated steel door at the back of the old dry good lot. It has a high-end thermal sensor array. But the security cameras pointed at its entrance? They've been under maintenance for a year. I checked the logs. They're not broken. They're running a 6-second loop. We're all told to ignore it. She was the one who had sent me the safe deposit key. She had been copying the night logs for 6 months. She was the one who knew the exact timing of the shipments. She was my inside source. Why me, Arya? Why risk all this for me? You're the only one who ever told the truth in a Whitlow building, she said. You taught us that a corporation is just a story, and this story is a lie. The third vertex of our triangle was Mateo, the man I had hired as the North Star investigator. He was ex-freight, a veteran who knew every trick. After his first ride-along, he had come back to me, his face grim. He was willing to be my witness. He had spoken to the other drivers. He confirmed they were paid a cash bonus for the stop at Warehouse 7. He would provide a sworn, notarized affidavit detailing the stop, the unmarked warehouse, and the presence of Camille's private security, on the condition of absolute anonymity until he and his family were protected. Lauren, Owen, Arya, Mateo, a consultant, a CFO, a coordinator, and a driver. It was a small, tight circle, but we had a problem, a public one. Julian Ryder. Julian was the city compliance officer. More than that, he was the city's top compliance lawyer. Every contract, every partnership, every charitable dollar the city touched had to go through his office. He was the gatekeeper, and he was an old, dear friend of Camille's. I'd seen them at countless events, laughing, sharing inside jokes. He was either willfully blind or fully complicit. Either way, he was a roadblock. If I leaked the data, he would be the one to investigate, and he would bury it. I couldn't go around him. I had to go through him. I scheduled a meeting, using my professional credentials. Off the record, I said, regarding a potential exposure in the city's disaster relief supply chain. His office was sterile, gray, and efficient. He was wary, his expression unreadable. Lauren, he said, not standing up. This is a surprise. Julian, I'm not here as Graham's daughter. I'm here as a risk consultant. I've uncovered a significant liability that exposes the city. I'm giving you the professional courtesy of seeing it before it becomes a headline. I didn't show him the theft. I showed him the fraud. I showed him Owen's insurance data. I showed him the articles of incorporation for Lantern Logistics LLC, the company registered to Camille's assistant. He read the documents in silence, his face hardening. He got to the LLC filing, the one from the safe deposit box. He stopped, his eyes narrowing. "This," he said, tapping the screen, "this digital signature." He turned to his own terminal, typed for a moment, and pulled up another file. It was the city's contract with the Glass Lantern Fund. "I knew I recognized it," he whispered, his voice shaking with a cold, sudden rage. "It's her, Camille. She used her official, encrypted city vendor signature to sign the formation documents for the shell company. She linked herself, personally, to the fraud." He looked up at me, and he was no longer Camille's friend. He was a prosecutor who had just been handed a loaded gun. "She made me a witness," he said. "She made me complicit." "She's counting on your friendship to protect her," I said. "Friendship doesn't cover this." He closed the file. "What do you need?" "For now, nothing. Just be at the gala, and be ready to do your job when the time comes." The alliance was set, but one question remained. I went back to Owen. One last time, the day before the gala. "Owen," I asked. "My father, Graham, he signed the authorization. He knows about the warehouse. He's part of it, isn't he?" Owen looked away, and for the first time, I saw pity in his eyes. "Lauren, your father is the best logistics man in the country. He worships efficiency. Camille sold him a story. She told him the aid depots were too slow, that children were suffering because of red tape. She told him Warehouse 7 was a rapid response hub, a place to optimize the flow, to pre-position assets so she could deploy them faster." I felt the floor drop out from under me. He thinks it's an emergency measure?" "He thinks he's a hero," Owen said. "He thinks he's cutting through bureaucracy to save lives. He authorized the stops. He authorized the discretionary account. He doesn't know she's emptying the boxes. He doesn't know about the insurance, or the LLC, or the resales. He doesn't want to know. He's a man who trusts his wife, and he loves a good, efficient system." I walked out of his office and into the cold Denver air. The entire plan, the entire motivation, shifted. This was no longer just about destroying Camille. It was about ripping the veil from my father's eyes. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool, blinded by his own arrogance and the woman he'd chosen over me. The goal was not just to expose a criminal. It was to force a father to see the truth. The gala wasn't just a stage. It was an operating theater. The grand ballroom of the Whitney Conservatory was a masterpiece of warm, golden light. Hundreds of candles seemed to float in the air, their glow reflecting off the crystal glasses and the heavy silver on each of the 50-plus tables. At the front, on a stage bathed in a soft, forgiving spotlight, Camille Roth was giving the performance of her life. "It is not a fund," she was saying, her voice thick with practiced emotion, her hand resting delicately on the polished lectern. "It is a promise. It is a light, a simple glass lantern that we carry into the darkest, coldest corners of our state, a light that finds the children who thought they were forgotten." The audience, 500 of Denver's wealthiest and most powerful, was rapt. They were bathed in her manufactured warmth, sipping their $1,000-a-plate wine, and believing in the mask she wore. It was a beautiful mask, all compassion and selfless civic duty. I watched from the shadows. I had declined a seat at the head table, claiming a logistical oversight with our North Star team. Instead, I was standing at the back of the hall, next to the audio-visual booth, a technician's headset dangling uselessly from the console. This position gave me a perfect, unobstructed view of the stage, the two enormous video screens flanking it, and most importantly, the head table where my father sat, his gaze fixed on his wife with a look of profound, misguided pride. In my hand, I held a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of Camille's speech, my script. "This last quarter alone," Camille continued, her voice soaring with triumph, We delivered over 5,000 high-altitude thermal blankets to the families of Clear Creek County. The room erupted in applause. A woman at a nearby table dabbed her eye. I looked down at my script. With a black pen, I drew a single, neat line through that sentence. 5,000. The lie I had fed her, the real number, confirmed by Aria's stolen shipping manifests, was 1,950. The rest had been lost in transit. And through our rapid response program, Camille said, leaning into the microphone, we successfully processed and delivered over $1.2 million in direct-to-community aid, bypassing the red tape that so often costs lives. More applause. My father was clapping, his expression one of pure, unadulterated admiration for his brilliant wife. I drew a line through that number, too. 1.2 million. I knew, from Owen's data and the ledgers in the Clear Creek Bank, that $480,000 of that aid had been processed. All right, it had been processed directly into the Lantern Logistics LLC account, where it was currently pending transfer to an offshore entity. This was the mask, not just her face, but the entire reality she had constructed, a reality built of paper numbers, of false compassions, and of my script. She was performing my lies perfectly. My phone vibrated, a silent, insistent buzz in my pocket. I looked at the screen. The time was 9:45 p.m. It was a text from Aria, a single period. The signal. She was in position. The scene cut. The warm golden light of the gala vanished, replaced by the sterile, chemical blue flicker of a dying fluorescent tube. The sound of Vivaldi was gone, replaced by the metallic scrape of a cloned keycard sliding into a high-security reader. Aria Bloom stood in a dark, unmarked service alley, her breath pluming in the cold night air. The door in front of her was a single, imposing sheet of gray, unnumbered steel. She pushed, and the lock clicked open with a heavy, oily thud. She stepped inside. This was Warehouse 7. The air was frigid, smelling of cold rubber, dust, and a faint, sweet chemical tang. The vast, cavernous space was lit only by a few emergency blue tube lights, creating more shadows than illumination. Aria clicked a high-powered flashlight, its white beam cutting through the darkness, and the truth of the glass lantern was revealed. It was a graveyard of good intentions. To the left, stacked 12 feet high, were the official, shrink-wrapped pallets, all bearing the glowing logo of the glass lantern. They were identical to the ones being delivered to the legitimate charity hubs. But here, in this ghost warehouse, they were waiting. To the right, stacked in neat, identical rows, were pallets of a different kind, crates of high-end electronics, boxes of designer clothing, cartons of premium, imported vodka. All of it bore the shipping labels of a local, high-end supermarket chain known for its discreet, wealthy clientele. Aria had found the other side of the ledger. Camille wasn't just stealing aid. She was using the Whitlow transit system as a private, untaxed, and illegal distribution arm for a black market retail operation. Across town, in a dark, parked sedan, 2 blocks from his own office, Owen Park hit enter on his encrypted laptop. He was logged into the insurance consortium's mainframe through a secure portal. He navigated to the Whitlow Transit Group's corporate account, to the list of pending claims. He found the most recent one, a total loss claim for a shipment of medical-grade diagnostic equipment, valued at $200,000, lost on the route to Georgetown. He clicked the claim number. He selected the Flag for Manual Audit option. He added a note. Source data discrepancy. Manifest serials do not match pallet scan archive. Cross-reference with sister claim 9X4B. He clicked Submit. A red icon appeared next to the claim. Frozen. He had just jammed the gears. The automatic payout was stopped. The money was trapped. And he had just created an official, time-stamped, undeletable record of the fraud, tying it to a previous, successful claim. The dominoes were now linked. Back in Warehouse 7, Mateo stepped out from behind a stack of stolen blankets. He nodded to Aria. his face grim in the flashlight's glare. "Clear. We're alone." Arya led him to the far corner, to a single, isolated pallet. It was the one that had arrived from North Star Relief 2 weeks prior, my trial shipment. "This is it," Arya whispered. Mateo raised his phone. He didn't maintain focus, his breath fogging. He wasn't photographing the pallet itself, but the seal. He zoomed in on the custom-printed, high-security QR tape I had affixed to the lead crate. The camera's flash popped, brutally bright in the darkness. On his phone's screen, the image was crystal clear. The tape was perfect. The QR code was unscanned. The tamper-evident polymer was smooth, glossy, and unbroken. This was the proof, this pallet, which had been logged by Whitlow Transit as lost, damaged, and salvaged for parts, had never been opened. It had never been lost. It was sitting here, untouched, in Camille's private treasure chest. Back at the gala, Camille was winding down. Her performance was nearing its end. She held up her hands, basking in the applause. Thank you," she said, her voice dropping to a humble, gentle tone. "But I am not the true hero here. The heroes are our partners, our new partners, who share our vision." She turned, her gaze sweeping the room, and found me, standing in the shadows by the AV booth. The spotlight operator, following her cue, swung his beam onto me, pinning me in its white, blinding glare. "One such partner is here tonight," Camille announced, her smile impossibly wide. "A new organization, North Star Relief, has just pledged a staggering $1.5 million donation." The room gasped, then burst into a new, more fervent round of applause. "Please," Camille boomed, "join me in welcoming its representative, a woman who shares our deep commitment to logistics and morality, a woman I am so very proud to know, Lauren Middleton." It was a trap, a beautiful, arrogant trap. By calling me up, by linking me to her publicly, she was absorbing me. She was making me a co-conspirator in her narrative. I was the good daughter, the partner, the one who endorsed her. My silence on stage would be my endorsement. I walked toward the stage, my steps measured, my expression calm. I moved through the tables, the applause washing over me, the faces of my father's friends and colleagues turning to watch. I reached the small set of stairs, my hand gliding on the cool brass rail. I stepped onto the stage. Camille embraced me, a dry, cold kiss on the cheek, the smell of bergamot washing over me like a chemical solvent. She whispered in my ear, "You've earned this, darling. Say something nice." She stepped back, leaving me at the lectern, 500 pairs of eyes, 2 massive video screens projecting my face, 10 feet high. I looked out at the crowd. I found my father. His face was a mask of confusion, but also, for a fleeting, heartbreaking second, he looked proud. His daughter, on stage, at last. "Thank you, Camille," I said. My voice was clear, steady, and amplified, echoing through the silent ballroom. "It's an honor to be here." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "We at North Star Relief believe in a simple principle," I began. "Responsibility. We believe that when you promise to deliver, you must deliver, not just most of the way, not just part of the cargo, but all of it, every single piece." I saw my father's smile tighten. It was a subtle shift, a sudden alertness. "We live in a complex world," I continued, my hands resting lightly on the lectern. "It's easy to hide behind masks. We all wear them. Some are made of paper, some of gold. Some are masks of charity, some of business. But I've learned that masks made of paper are only strong when they are layered, one on top of the other, each layer reinforced by a truth." "Camille is right," I said, turning to smile at her. "It is about logistics. It's about knowing where every single package is. That's why North Star, as a condition of our partnership, will be auditing every serial number. We will be cross-referencing every pallet ID with every driver log." My father's face went from proud to pale. He knew my work. He knew my precision. This was not the vague, emotional language of a donor. This was the specific, cold language of an auditor. "We believe in true, radical transparency," I said, my gaze sweeping the room. "We need to follow the supply chain from the first mile to the final destination, even if that final destination is an unscheduled stop, even if it's the seventh warehouse on the route." At a table near the front, a man who looked like a bored academic pushed his glasses up his nose. He discreetly opened a notepad. He was my planted journalist. He wrote down Warehouse 7. "We need accountability," I said, my voice warming. "From the high peaks all the way down to the valley, from the first donation to the last ledger in the last bank in, say, Clear Creek." The reporter wrote Clear Creek because only when every item is accounted for, only when the manifests from a company, like Lantern Logistics, for example, match the delivery reports, can we truly say we've lit that lantern. The reporter wrote Lantern Logistics, LLC. I turned back to Camille. Her smile was still there. It was a rictus, a painted, porcelain mask, but I could see the cracks forming. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the side of the lectern. The heat from the stage lights was immense, and a single, tiny bead of sweat was beginning to trace a path down her temple, cutting a line through her perfect foundation. My father was no longer looking at me. He was staring at Camille, and for the first time, he was not seeing a savior. He was seeing a stranger. Outside, far in the distance, I heard the faint, piercing sound of a truck's air brakes, a sound from the real world, my father's world, a reminder. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 10:15 p.m. Showtime. The applause for my speech was a confused, scattering sound, like rain against a window. It was uncertain, probing. The donors didn't know what I had just said. Not really, but they knew it was not on the program. Camille, beside me on the stage, was a statue of white marble. Her smile was still fixed, but her eyes had gone flat and cold. She was calculating. My phone, in the silk pocket of my dress, gave a single, sharp vibration. It was 10:15 p.m. The signal, the moment the clock struck, the mechanisms I had set in motion, miles apart, began to turn. In the freezing blue-lit cavern of Warehouse 7, Aria Bloom hit send on her burner phone. The file was a compressed archive. Mateo's high-resolution photographs of the stolen pallets, the unbroken North Star seal, the stacks of black market electronics, and the corresponding fraudulent glass lantern manifests. She uploaded it to a temporary, encrypted server. The link she generated was a ghost, set to expire in exactly 15 minutes. In the ballroom, at the press table, the journalist I knew as Mark felt his phone buzz. An anonymous airdrop request from a user named Broken Lantern. He accepted. It was not a photo. It was a single line of text on a black screen. Ask about serial number 4X-7721. High Value Medical, claim 9X4B. In his car, parked in the darkness of a downtown garage, Owen Park executed the final command. He was logged into the Whitlow Transit mainframe through a back-end security portal. At 10:15 on the dot, he ran the script. An immediate audit lock was placed on all accounts associated with the Glass Lantern Fund. He typed the reason: reconciling insurance claim discrepancy, see file 9X4B. He hit enter. An undeletable log was instantly created, time-stamped, and buried deep in the company's server, a permanent record of his actions. Camille's access to her shadow accounts was now severed. Back on the stage, the confused applause was dying. The master of ceremonies, a nervous man from a local news station, was looking at his cue cards, desperate to get the program back on track. Thank you, Ms. Middleton," he stammered, "for that passionate commitment." I smiled at him, and it was my turn to move. I held up the heavy cream-colored envelope embossed with the North Star Relief logo. "Camille," I said, my voice projecting across the silent, watching room. "On behalf of North Star, I'd like to present the first part of our commitment to the fund, a symbol of our partnership. The MC, seeing a photo opportunity, a return to normalcy, hurried over. Wonderful. Let's get a shot of this. I bypassed him. I walked directly to Camille and held the envelope out to her. She was forced to take it. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. The two of us, smiling, passing the donation. She expected a check, a giant, oversized piece of cardboard for the papers. She held the thick, heavy envelope. Her smile was still in place, but her fingers fumbled with the flap. She was expecting a single sheet of cardstock. Instead, her fingers found a sheaf of papers. The smile faltered. Confusion flickered across her face, projected 10 feet high on the screens. She pulled the papers out. It was not a check. It was a 20-page document. The audience couldn't see the details, but they could see her reaction. Her face went blank as she saw the header. It was the printout from my clutch, the side-by-side comparison. On the left, the golden numbers from her speech, the 5,000 blankets, the 1.2 million in aid. On the right, the internal shipping manifests, the real numbers, and on the final page, the $200,000 insurance claim that Owen had just frozen, with pending fraud audit stamped across it in digital red. She shuffled the papers, her eyes scanning, her mind racing. The mask was slipping. She was no longer a philanthropist. She was a cornered animal. A shadow fell beside me. My father. He had left his seat, traversed the length of the ballroom, and mounted the stairs to the stage. His face was a thundercloud, gray and charged with a terrifying, contained energy. He didn't look at Camille. He looked at me. He leaned in, his voice a low, vicious hiss, meant only for me. But the hot microphone on the lectern was just inches away. "Lauren, stop." His voice, cold and final, was the same one he'd used in the dressing room. "This is not the time. You are embarrassing this family. Stop it, now." I stared into the eyes of the man who had taught me everything, and who had learned nothing. The man who had chosen a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. "It is never the time, Dad," I whispered back, my voice clear and hard. "It's always not the time. It's always not tonight. That's the problem. But we're here, so I am choosing, right now." The tension in the ballroom was a physical thing, a vacuum sucking the air out of the room. The silence was absolute. Into that void, a voice boomed from the floor. "Miss Roth." It was Mark, the journalist. He was on his feet, his press pass swinging. He wasn't waiting for permission. "Ms. Roth," he called out, and the audio technician, seeing a guest question, instinctively swiveled a boom mic toward the sound. Suddenly, Mark's voice was filling the entire hall. "You spoke of transparency. Can you please clarify the function of Warehouse 7? A collective gasp. Camille's head snapped up. The specificity of the name, her name for it, hit her like a bullet. "And," Mark continued, reading from his phone, "can you comment on serial number 4X-7721? It was part of a $200,000 medical shipment. Your partner, Whitlow Transit, reported it lost due to weather. My sources say it's currently intact. Can you tell us which is true?" Every eye in the room, 500 pairs, snapped from me to Camille. She was trapped in the spotlight. She tried to laugh. It was a horrifying, brittle sound, like glass shattering on a tile floor. I have no idea what you're talking about," she stammered, her hand fluttering to her throat. This is an absurd interruption. We have so many partners, so many warehouses. It's a complex logistical operation." She saw a path, a plausible exit. "And yes," she said, her voice regaining a fraction of its composure, finding its familiar, sympathetic tone. "Tragically, we do lose shipments. It is heartbreaking. The weather in the mountains, ice, snow, it's a brutal reality. It's the cost of doing this vital work." It was the perfect deflection. She was a victim of nature, a martyr to the cause. The audience began to nod. relieved to be given a simple, believable explanation. My phone vibrated. A text from Arya. Now. Across town, in the freezing dark, Mateo was standing in front of the lost pallet. The serial number, 4X7721, was stenciled on its side. He was holding his phone, the camera on, a live time-stamped video feed running. "It's 10:22 p.m., Mateo said, his voice steady. "I'm inside Warehouse 7. This is the lost medical pallet, as you can see." He panned the camera down the shrink wrap. "Not a scratch on it. The North Star seal is intact. The weather in here is perfectly dry, about 34 degrees. Arya, standing beside him, took that live feed and, using the North Star vendor credentials I had given the AV team for our presentation, pushed it directly into their digital queue. On stage, the MC was flapping, desperate to save the night. "Thank you, Camille," he said, his voice too loud. "And now we have a special pre-recorded message. A look at the North Star logistics that Miss Middleton mentioned. Let's roll that." He turned to the AV booth, frantically signaling. The technician, panicked, saw the new file in his queue labeled North Star Feed. He hit the button. He switched the source. The two enormous screens flanking the stage did not cut to my donor logo. They cut to Mateo's phone. The first image was his own face, grim and lit from below. Then, the camera flipped. "This is the lost medical pallet," Mateo's voice boomed, echoing through the ballroom. The audience, in one collective motion, turned to the screens. They saw the pallet. They saw the serial number, 4X7721, in perfect, high-definition focus. Then, Mateo's camera panned. It panned past the stolen medical aid, to the stacks of glass lantern boxes, to the pallets of high-end vodka, to the crates of designer electronics, all labeled for a private retailer. A woman in the front row screamed. A man at the table next to her, a banking CEO, shot to his feet. "My God," he roared, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We pledged $5 million. $5 million. Janice, call legal. We're pulling our commitment now." The room exploded. The murmur became a roar. People were standing, shouting at the stage, pointing at the screens. The audio technician, realizing his catastrophic error, slammed his hand on the console. The screens went black. A second later, red text appeared. Offline source, unverified. It was too late. 500 of the city's most powerful people had seen the truth. They had seen inside the ghost warehouse. The first wave had struck. The financial partners were scattering. The public trust was shattered. I looked at Camille. She was shaking, her face white, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't running. She had dropped the papers. Her hands clenched into fists at her side. Her eyes, when they met mine, were not filled with fear. They were filled with a cold, reptilian, and murderous fury. She had been hit, but she had not fallen. She was a survivor, and she knew, without a single doubt, exactly who had done this. The black screens in the ballroom were a death sentence. The roar of the crowd was not a murmur of confusion. It was the sound of 500 powerful people realizing they had been fools, and they were furious. Security guards, my father's own men, were moving toward the stage. They were not looking at the crowd. They were looking at us, their faces grim, awaiting an order. "Backstage," my father snarled. His voice was a low, unrecognizable gravel. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in with a force that mirrored Camille's earlier assault. "Now." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and shoved his way through the heavy velvet curtain, back into the narrow, cold stone corridor. Camille did not need to be told. She moved like a viper, her emerald dress a blur as she swept past us, her head high, her expression one of pure, unadulterated fury. She pushed the door open. The thud of it closing behind us was deafening, shutting out the sound of the collapsing ballroom and sealing the three of us in a bright, white, humming silence. We were back where we started, The same cold room, the same harsh lights, the same mirror that had, only an hour before, reflected his indifference. Camille spun, her fury a tangible thing, a heat in the cold room. She did not look at me. She advanced on my father. "Graham, this is your doing," she hissed. "Your company, your contracts, your chaotic, hysterical daughter. You will go back out on that stage. You will tell them she is ill, that she is having a breakdown. You will tell them this is a corporate smear campaign by a rival. You will reassure our partners. You will handle your stockholders. And you," she finally turned her venom on me, "will be handled." My father didn't respond. He was staring at the sheaf of papers he had unconsciously, in the panic, snatched from the lectern. The papers I had handed Camille. My audit. He was staring at the line item for Warehouse 7, his signature visible on a reproduced manifest. "She is trying to destroy you, Graham," Camille said, her voice dropping, becoming intimate, conspiratorial. "She is trying to destroy us, but she can't." She moved to her own small, jeweled clutch, which she had left on the dressing table. She snapped it open and pulled out a single, neatly folded sheet of paper, Whitlow Transit Group letterhead. She smoothed it out under the harsh light. "She can't," Camille repeated, her voice a purr. "Because you are protected. We are protected." I stepped closer, close enough to read it. It was a corporate authorization, dated 18 months prior. It granted the Glass Lantern Fund full operational discretion to coordinate all emergency cargo shipments, including the use of auxiliary storage and rapid response staging areas, to ensure timely aid delivery and bypass bureaucratic delays. At the bottom, the signature was bold, confident, and utterly damning. Graham Whitlow. "You signed it, darling," Camille said, tapping the paper with a perfectly manipulated nail. "You signed off on the optimization of the flow. You authorized the auxiliary storage. That is Warehouse 7. Your idea, if you recall, your efficiency." My father looked up from the paper, his face the color of old chalk. "Camille," he said, his voice weak. This was for logistics, for speed. This was not for—" He couldn't say it. He couldn't give the crime a name. "This was not for this. This is for this," she snapped, her patience gone. "This is your shield. Graham, if this goes to court, if the city investigates, it is my word against hers, and this piece of paper says this was a Whitlow transit operation. It was a failure of your internal processes, a simple, regrettable logistical error. Your signature, Graham, your company, your mistake, and we will take a small hit. We will fire a few mid-level managers, and we will survive, as a family." He finally understood. He looked at the document, the proof of his own arrogance. He wasn't guilty of the theft, not of the insurance fraud, not of the resale. He was just the fool who had left the keys in the ignition, and Camille was pointing out that his fingerprints were all over the steering wheel. He was not her partner in crime. He was her designated scapegoat. My phone buzzed in my hand, a bright, sharp vibration. I looked down. 2 text messages had arrived at the exact same instant, from 2 different numbers. The first was from Owen, Insurance Co. "Legal is here, in the building. They want an emergency meeting. 10:30 p.m. Julian Ryder is with them. They know about 9X4B. The second was from Aria. "Lauren, security. Whitlow Internal Security is here. 2 men. The cameras are on. The loop is gone. They are filming us. Mateo is trying to stall. We're trapped in the warehouse." The pincers were closing. Camille's men had arrived to clean up the evidence, and the lawyers had arrived to find their culprit. "She's lying, Dad," I said, my voice cut through the silence. "She's lying, and she's out of time." I held up the phone, showing him the glowing screen. That was Owen. "The insurance company's lawyers are in this building. Right now. Julian Ryder is with them. They aren't here for a gala. They are here for the fraud. For claim 9X4B. Camille's head snapped toward me. For the first time, a hairline crack appeared in her composure. Julian. She had counted on his friendship. She had not counted on his ambition. And that, I continued, was Arya. Your private security team just arrived at Warehouse 7, the warehouse that doesn't exist, but the cameras are on now, aren't they? Camille? The broken cameras? Arya and Mateo are trapped inside, filming your men as they try to destroy evidence. I turned back to my father. He looked like a man about to fall from a very great height. You have one move, I said, my voice low and fast. One, you can't hide this. You can't spin it. Those 500 people out there have already sent 1,000 text messages. The story is out. You have one, and only one. Way to survive this. I step toward him. You walk out on that stage. You walk out there with me. You take that microphone, and you announce that you are welcoming a full, independent, third-party audit of the Glass Lantern Fund and all associated Whitlow contracts. You announce that, due to these disturbing irregularities, you are freezing the fund and that I, as an independent risk expert, will be overseeing the immediate and transparent transition of all assets to a legitimate, city-run relief organization. You get in front of it. You become the hero. Graham, the man who discovered the rot and cut it out, the man who sacrificed his own wife for the truth. No! Camille's shriek was ugly. She laughed, a desperate, rasping sound. An audit? With her? Graham, look at me. He turned, his face a mask of torn agony. She is offering you a public execution, Camille hissed, her hand going to his chest, her touch proprietary. I am offering you a shield. This paper, she tapped the authorization in his hand, is your shield. We use it. We blame a rogue employee. We blame that little coordinator, Arya. We blame Owen for his sloppy books. We are the victims. We are the family. We will weather this, together. She stepped between us, a physical barrier, her eyes locked on his. You have a choice, Graham. It is very simple. You choose your family. Her gaze was hypnotic, a performance of unwavering loyalty. Or you choose her. And there it was, the real theft. Camille had not just stolen money. She had not just stolen medicine. She had stolen my father, my company, my mother's memory, and now she was making her final play. She was stealing the very definition of family. She was twisting it into a synonym for a criminal conspiracy, a suicide pact. She was forcing my father to choose between his blood and his accomplice. She's right, Dad, I said. He looked at me, shocked by my agreement. It is a choice. You can choose her. You can choose that piece of paper. You can try to fight the city, and the insurance company, and the press, and the board of directors. You can try to fight me. You will lose, but you can try. I took a step, flanking Camille, forcing him to look at us both. But know this, the entire Whitlow board is out in that ballroom. The executive committee is watching this happen. The man you've been grooming as your successor is at table 4. If you choose silence tonight, if you choose her, if you choose to hide behind this lie. I let the words hang, cold and heavy in the air. I promise you, by the time the markets open tomorrow, they will be choosing a different successor, someone other than you, your company, your legacy. It will be gone. The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing weight. I could hear my own heart pounding, a dull drum against my ribs. Outside the door, the chaos had momentarily subsided. The event staff, in a moment of absurd, surreal denial, had put the background music back on. A single classical harp, its delicate crystalline notes trickled under the door, a mocking, elegant soundtrack to the end of our world. Graham Whitlow stood in the center of the room, trapped. He looked at the authorization in his hand, the evidence of his own lethal arrogance. He looked at Camille, her face a mask of desperate, demanding love, and then he looked at me, my face cold, my phone held up, the glowing texts from Owen and Arya a ticking bomb. He let out a breath, a long, ragged, tearing sound. He scrubbed his hand over his face, and in that instant, he looked like a frail, old man. He closed his eyes. He swallowed, a dry clicking sound in his throat. I need 5 minutes. The 5 minutes were a compressed eternity. The backstage room was a vacuum. The only sound, the faint, maddeningly cheerful trickle of the harp from the ballroom. Camille stood by the door, her back to us, her shoulders rigid. She was a coiled spring, ready to strike, still believing she held the power. My father did not look at her. He did not look at me. He looked at the white-painted stone wall, at a spot just above my head. He was not a husband. He was not a father. He was a chief executive officer calculating the blast radius. When he finally moved, he moved with a sudden, final seeming resolution. He straightened his tie, the same gesture he had used when he dismissed my pain. But this time it was not an avoidance. It was a preparation. It was armor. He walked to the door. Camille turned, a triumphant, proprietary smile starting to form on her lips, assuming he was coming to her, that they would walk out together, a united front. He walked right past her. He did not touch her. He did not acknowledge her. He pushed the door open, the sound of the chaotic ballroom, the shouting, the nervous laughter, the scraping of chairs, rushing in to fill the silence. He stepped out into the light. Camille's smile froze. The blood drained from her face. She knew. In that instant, she had lost. I followed him. A single step behind. A witness. Camille. Her face a mask of incandescent hatred. Followed me. We were a bizarre, funereal procession walking back into the chaos we had created. The MC was on stage, sweating under the lights, frantically trying to introduce a silent auction item, his voice cracking. And this beautiful, a weekend in Vale. My father walked past him, ignoring the offered microphone. He went straight to the main lectern, the one I had just left. The audience, seeing him, fell into a deep, shocked silence. The MC's voice trailed off. The only sound was the distant, inappropriate cheer of the harp. My father placed his hands on the sides of the lectern. He was a man who had commanded stages his entire life. He looked out over the 500 pale, upturned faces, the sea of donors, politicians, and press. "Please," he said. His voice was not a request. It was an order. It boomed, amplified, through the vast hall. "Please, stop the music." In the AV booth, the sound technician scrambled. The harp was cut mid-note. The silence that fell was absolute, heavy, and terrifying. It was the sound of a universe holding its breath. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," Graham began. His voice was raw, but it was the strongest I had ever heard it. "I want to thank you for your generosity, for your belief in the work we do, in the work we intended to do." He paused, and I could see the muscles in his jaw working. He was not reading from a script. This was a living autopsy. "In light of information that has been brought to my attention this evening, and irregularities that I can neither explain nor ignore, I am, effective immediately, announcing the full and immediate suspension of all operations of the Glass Lantern Fund." A gasp re-aria through the room, a collective, sharp intake of breath. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice overriding the murmur, "I am personally apologizing for a catastrophic failure in operational supervision. My supervision. We pride ourselves on transparency, and it is clear that I have allowed that standard to fail. I will fix it." He looked directly at the press table. "As of this moment, the Whitlow Transit Group is commissioning a full, top-to-bottom, independent forensic audit of every transaction, every shipment, and every dollar ever associated with the fund." He had seized the narrative. He was not the criminal. He was the judge. "This will not be an internal matter," he said, his voice like iron. "This audit must be, and will be, led by a trusted, objective, external expert, a professional with the authority to follow the evidence, wherever it leads, and the integrity to report it. To that end, I am formally asking—" He turned, and his eyes found me. He was not looking at his daughter. He was looking at a professional. "I am formally asking Ms. Lauren Middleton, in her capacity as an independent legal risk consultant, to agree to lead this reconciliation, to chair the audit, and to work with the city to ensure every promised item of aid is accounted for. He was brilliant. He was terrifying. He had just handed me the keys to the kingdom and the knife to gut it, all in one sentence, all in front of 500 witnesses. He held out his hand to me. I walked forward. I could feel Camille's eyes on my back, a physical, burning heat. I stepped up to the lectern, beside my father. I did not take his hand. The room exploded, but it was not with sound, it was with light. In one unified, silent motion, 500 people raised their cell phones. It was a forest of blue-white light, a sea of digital eyes, all pointing at us. They were not just an audience anymore, they were a jury, and every single one of them was taking notes. I looked at Camille. She was standing a few feet away, by the steps, a forgotten statue. Her face was perfect, white and smooth. Her smile, the one she had worn all night, was still there, but it was no longer attached to her. It was a piece of plaster, a death mask, and her eyes, staring blankly ahead, were filled with a cold, hollow emptiness. I turned back to the microphone. The silence was waiting to be filled. "Transparency," I said, my voice clear and carrying over the stillness, "is the only light that casts no shadow." A reporter's voice, the same one as before, shouted from the floor, "Ms. Middleton, Lauren, does this mean you confirm the existence of Warehouse 7? I looked toward the voice. I did not blink. "We cannot comment on the specifics of an active and ongoing review, but I can confirm that all relevant data has been secured and preserved according to established protocol." Secured, preserved. The words were as cold and hard as the evidence itself. "This is an outrage!" A new voice, a powerful male voice, boomed from the head table. It was the CEO of the Kincaid Foundation, the man who had pledged $5 million. He was on his feet, his face purple. "This is not an error, Graham. This is a betrayal." He pointed a finger, not at my father, but at Julian Ryder, the city lawyer, who was standing near the wall. "Julian, the Kincaid Foundation is formally redirecting our $5 million commitment. We are pulling it from this fund, and placing it directly with your city-run relief channel, effective immediately. We will see you in court." This was the avalanche. The first boulder was rolling. "Please." It was Camille. She lunged forward, grabbing the other microphone, the one the MC had abandoned. Her voice was no longer smooth. It was a high-pitched, tearing sound, and she was crying. Huge. Theatrical tears were carving paths through her perfect makeup. Her emerald dress heaved. She was no longer a statue. She was a victim. It was her last, most practiced, most desperate mask. "Please, don't you understand?" she sobbed, looking wildly at the sea of cameras. "I did it. I did it for the children, the bureaucracy, the red tape. It was too slow. People were suffering. Do you have any idea? The pressure to do good, to save everyone, to do the impossible." She was playing her final card. She was the martyr. She was the woman who had cared too much, who had bent the rules for a higher moral purpose. A few people in the crowd looked uncertain, their anger softening with pity. It was a brilliant performance. I stepped back to my own microphone. I waited for her sob to quiet for a moment. I tilted my head, as if genuinely considering her words. And then I spoke, not to her, but to the phones, to the crowd, to the city. "Doing good," I said, my voice cutting, clear, and cold. "Doesn't require a secret warehouse." Silence. 1 second, 2, and then a sound. It was not a gasp, it was applause. It started at the back, near the press table, a single, sharp clap, then another. It was a sparse, scattered sound at first, but then the middle of the room joined in. And then the front. It was not the warm, polite applause of a gala. It was a hard, sharp, angry sound. It was the sound of a verdict. It was the sound of a spell being broken. It was the sound of 500 people, in unison, choosing a new story. The applause grew, not in celebration of me, but in validation of the truth. It became a roar, a wave that washed over the stage, drowning out Camille's manufactured sobs. She stopped crying instantly. The tears vanished, as if a tap had been turned off. She looked at the crowd, her face naked. She saw my father, his face like stone, not looking at her. She saw me, unmoving, and she heard the applause, the sound of her own execution. She dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a heavy, booming thud that echoed through the speakers, a final, hollow punctuation mark. She turned. Her back was perfectly straight. Her head was high. She did not run. She walked. She descended the stairs, her emerald dress moving like a whisper, and walked, not ran, through the crowd, who parted for her as if she were a ghost. I watched her go. I watched her reach the shadows of the main exit. She thought she was clear. She thought no one was watching. She ripped her phone from her clutch. Her fingers, no longer trembling, flew across the screen. She put it to her ear. She spoke only 2 words, but in the sudden quiet of the hall, her voice carried back to me, a low, venomous hiss. Delete everything. I did not wait for the applause to die. I did not wait to see the expression on my father's face. The moment the applause for my final, cold statement began to rise, I turned and walked off the stage, leaving him alone in the spotlight he had so desperately sought to reclaim. I moved through the heavy velvet side curtain, bypassing the backstage dressing room, and pushed through an emergency exit into the cold, sharp reality of the Denver night, the heat and noise of the gala, the golden light, the smell of champagne and perfume. It all vanished, sealed off by the heavy closing door. The air out here was cold. It smelled of asphalt, parked cars, and the faint, dusty scent of the conservatory's gardens. A black sedan, engine idling, was parked in the fire lane. Mateo. I pulled open the passenger door and slid in. The car was warm. Aria Bloom was in the back seat, her face pale in the glow of her phone screen, but her eyes were bright. "He's moving," she said, her voice tight. "Owen?" I asked, pulling the seatbelt across the front of my gala dress. "No, Julian. He's with the insurance lawyers. They're in the building, in a conference room with your father's board members." "Camille?" "Garage," Mateo said, his voice a low rumble. He put the car in gear, and we pulled away from the curb, our tires whispering on the pavement. "She ran. She's in her own car. She's fast. But we're faster." He accelerated, merging into the light traffic, leaving the Whitney Conservatory and its internal chaos behind us. We were 3 shadows, leaving a fire to burn, on our way to secure the source of the gasoline. The drive was 20 minutes of focused silence. We left the polished, wealthy center of the city and plunged into the dark, functional grid of the industrial sector near the rail yards. This was a world of concrete tilt-up buildings, chain-link fences, and the distant, lonely hum of transformers. At 10:45 p.m., Mateo killed the headlights. We rolled to a stop in a service alley that smelled of old garbage and ozone. It was pitch black, a canyon of brick and corrugated steel. "This is it," Aria whispered. "Warehouse 7. "Owen's status?" I asked, my hand on the door. "He's in," Aria said. "He's monitoring the insurance consortium's security panel. He's locked out Camille, but he's watching for any other access. He's our overwatch." "Let's go." We moved as a unit, Mateo, me, then Aria. The night was cold, and the thin silk of my dress was useless against it. I welcomed the chill. It sharpened my focus. Aria stepped up to the unmarked gray steel door, the one her cloned keycard had opened before. She swiped. The high-security lock clicked, a sharp, metallic sound that seemed deafening in the silence. Mateo put his shoulder to the door and pushed. It swung open onto a vast black void. A rush of frigid air hit us. carrying the sterile, chemical scent of new plastic and cold, dusty concrete. Arya clicked on a small, powerful flashlight. Its white beam cut a cone into the darkness, illuminating the cathedral of Camille's greed. It was exactly as the video feed had shown. To our left, the towering, shrink-wrapped pallets, all branded with the bright, hopeful logo of the glass lantern. To our right, the shadow inventory, stacked cases of high-end electronics, designer goods, and fine wine, all bearing the fresh, new shipping labels of a private, third-party reseller. Her internal security team, I said, my voice low. Where are they? Arya pointed the beam toward the back corner. The office. They're still in there. I can see their light under the door. They must be wiping the local servers. Then they're busy, I said. Let's secure the evidence. I led the way, past the rows of stolen goods, to the far corner, to my pallet, the North Star relief shipment, the one lost to the weather. A sudden sharp sound cut through the silence. A car door, slamming, hard, in the alley outside. Matteo instantly moved in front of Arya, shielding her. We cut the flashlight. The darkness was total. We heard footsteps on the gravel. Fast, angry, and more than one person. The steel door was shoved open, crashing against the inner wall. The alley light framed two silhouettes, and then a third. I knew it, Camille's voice echoed, sharp and stripped of all its practiced, tearful sincerity. I knew you'd be stupid enough to come here. The lights of the warehouse flickered, then buzzed, then snapped on. The harsh, blue-white fluorescent tubes illuminated everything, blinding us. Camille stood at the entrance, flanked by her two private security guards, the same men Arya had seen. She was no longer in her emerald gown. She had changed. She wore a black tactical coat, black slacks, and boots. She was dressed for war. Her face was a mask of cold, white rage. You tracked us, I said. It wasn't a question. The sample case, she sneered, walking into the warehouse, her men fanning out. The one with your little GPS tracker in it. You think I'm an idiot? I let you plant it. I've been tracking you for weeks. Lauren, I knew exactly where my little North Star was. I just had to wait for the rat to come back for the cheese. Her men were walking the perimeter, their eyes on Matteo. They were professionals. This is all over. Camille, I said, standing my ground beside the pallet. Over? She laughed. A real, sharp, ugly sound. It's just beginning. My men are wiping the servers. This is just inventory. It will all be gone by morning. The insurance claim, the lawyers, that's just paperwork. It's noise. It's what I pay men like your father to handle. You're not walking out of here, I said. Oh, I think I am. She stepped closer, the guards moving with her. But I am a reasonable woman. You've made a mess. Lauren, a terrible, public, and very expensive mess. But you're smart. I'll give you that. She stopped 10 feet away. So here is the negotiation. You, Arya, Matteo, you walk out of here, you delete your files, you give me that USB drive I know you have, you give me the key to that safe deposit box, you disappear. And in return, I asked, I'll be setting up a new fund, somewhere, warmer, with better partners. You hand over all your research, all your data, and I'll give you a share, a real one, 40%. 40% of a new, clean operation. No more mistakes. No more sentimental old fools like your father. I held her gaze. I slipped my hand into my clutch and found my phone. I tapped the screen, opening the voice recorder app. Let me be clear, I said, my voice intentionally loud, projecting into the vast, echoing space. I hit the record button and turned on the external speaker. My own voice, amplified, filled the warehouse. You are offering me a bribe, 40%, in exchange for destroying evidence of wire fraud, mail fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Is that your offer, Camille? Her eyes narrowed, her guards tensed, their hands going inside their jackets. And you are making this offer, I continued, in a warehouse that is under active, high-definition camera surveillance. Camille's smile returned. It was a skull's grin. You really are a child. You think I don't know my own business? Those are my cameras. You idiot. They record to my server. The server that is, at this very moment, being magnetically wiped by my men in that office. There is no record. Lauren, there is only my offer. She's right, Lauren, Arya said, her voice small. Camille's smile widened. Those cameras are hers, Arya said, stepping out from behind Mateo. That's why I didn't trust them. Arya met my eyes, and she winked. She reached down to the corner of the pallet we were standing beside, a stack of thermal blankets. She pulled a small black box from where it had been wedged between the cardboard and the shrink wrap. This, however, Arya said, holding it up, is mine, independent, battery-powered, audio and video. It's been running for the last 2 hours, and it just got a crystal-clear recording of your 40% bribe. Camille's face went from white to ashen. The composure, the arrogance, it all shattered. The panic was real. Mateo, I said, now. Get it! Camille shrieked, lunging for the recorder. Get their phones! Get everything! The 2 guards moved. They were fast, but Mateo was faster. He wasn't moving toward the guards. He sprinted, in the opposite direction, toward the massive, rolling steel freight-loading door. He grabbed the bright red emergency release chain and yanked it down with all his weight. The warehouse was instantly engulfed in a sound so loud, it was a physical force, a deafening, piercing klaxon, red strobe lights ignited, bathing the entire scene in pulses of blood-red light. The massive door began to grind, slowly, scraping its way up. What did you do? Camille screamed, clutching her head. That's the industrial park's central security, Mateo roared over the alarm. It's not your system. Camille, it's theirs. It's wired to every door. It alerts the whole grid to an unauthorized breach. It summons them. Get the phones, Camille shrieked, her voice tearing. I don't care. Get their phones. The 2 guards ignored Mateo. They charged us. One went for Arya, who was clutching the recorder. The other one came for me, his hand outstretched, grabbing for my phone. Mateo slammed one of them with a crossbody block, sending him crashing into a stack of electronics. But the other one was on me. He grabbed my arm, the same arm Camille had bruised, his fingers like a steel trap. I didn't fight him. I didn't pull away. I dropped my phone. I grabbed the small, high-powered flashlight from Arya's belt, clicked it on, and jammed the beam against my own wrist, illuminating the dark, ugly bruise, the fingerprint marks from the gala. Now stark and purple under the white light and red strobes. Stop, I commanded, my voice cutting through the din. The guard paused, his hand still on my arm, his eyes blinded by the light. I am an adult, I shouted, locking eyes with him. This is evidence of a violent assault. You are now a witness. If you take my phone, if you touch me again, you will be recorded as an accessory to that assault and charged with evidence tampering. The guard, a professional paid to mitigate risk, froze. His eyes flickered from my face to the bruise, to the flashing red lights. He understood. This was no longer a simple cleanup. This was a legal nightmare. The grinding of the freight door stopped. It was fully open, revealing the alley, now flooded with the headlights of an approaching vehicle. A white sedan with a security logo on the side skidded to a stop. 2 uniformed men from the industrial park's private security force jumped out, their hands on their belts, their faces hard. They were the objective witnesses. Nobody move, the lead guard yelled, his voice carrying over the dying klaxon. What in the hell is going on here? Camille, in a final, brilliant pivot, ran toward them. Thank God, she cried, instantly reverting to the role of the victim. These people, they broke in. They attacked my staff. They are trying to steal from me. The 2 guards looked from her, a wealthy, panicked woman, to us, me, in a torn and dirty gala dress, Arya, a terrified-looking young woman clutching a black box, Mateo. a large man breathing hard. "We are here to prevent the destruction of evidence," I said, my voice calm, projecting. "This is Warehouse 7. My name is Lauren Middleton. This woman," I pointed at Camille, "is the subject of a criminal investigation for insurance fraud. The police are on their way." The guards were caught. He said, she said, in the middle of the night. "I don't care who you are," the lead guard said, pulling his radio. "We're sealing this site. Nobody goes in. Nobody comes out. We're calling the Denver police." My phone, lying on the floor, buzzed. A text. I bent and picked it up. It was from Owen. "You won't have to," I said to the guard. He looked at me, annoyed. I held up the phone. "This is a text from Owen Park, the CFO of the Whitlow Transit Group. He is currently with the legal team from the Allied Insurance Consortium. As of 1 minute ago, an emergency digital warrant was signed by a judge, prompted by their investigation. That warrant is being sent to your main office and the Denver police, demanding that this warehouse, this specific address, be legally sealed and all its contents preserved, pending verification for felony insurance fraud." I looked at Camille. Her face was no longer pale. It was gray. "You're too late, Camille," I said. "Owen just locked the door, legally." The lead park guard looked at Camille, his eyes narrowing. He had heard the word warrant. He looked at his partner. "Secure the perimeter," he said. "This is a crime scene." He then looked at Camille, his voice flat, all deference gone. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you, and your men, to step outside. Now." The sun was sharp and unforgiving the next morning, slicing across the glass and steel boardroom on the 40th floor. It was 8 a.m. The air was chilled, smelling of industrial carpet cleaner and a faint, metallic scent of fear. The emergency board meeting had been called at dawn. I was seated at the long, polished table. My father, Graham Whitlow, sat at its head, but he was a man hollowed out. He was a gray suit, his eyes fixed on the Denver skyline, his face the color of the granite facade. He had not slept. He began. His voice was a dry rasp, the sound of a man reading his own eulogy. He did exactly as I had told him. He spoke of the gala, of the disturbing allegations that had been raised. He did not call them truths. He called them allegations. He presented his immediate, decisive action, the suspension of the Glass Lantern Fund. He apologized, not for the crime, but for the catastrophic failure in oversight and the unacceptable exposure this had caused the Whitlow brand. He announced the full, independent audit he had personally commissioned, and then, his eyes finding me across the table, he formally introduced me, Ms. Middleton, as the external, independent consultant who would be leading the audit. It was a masterful performance of controlled contrition, a corporation cauterizing a wound, designed to save the ship, not the passenger. Then it was Camille's turn. She was not the sobbing victim from the stage. She was not the black-clad warrior from the warehouse. She was here, seated 2 chairs down from my father, flanked by a shark from the most predatory law firm in the city. She was the picture of wronged innocence, her face pale, her gaze clear. "My client," her lawyer began, his voice as smooth and cold as the marble floor, "is the true victim here. Ms. Roth has been systematically deceived." His narrative was simple. He blamed a rogue element in the transport division, referencing a file of falsified driver logs. He blamed faulty logistics from the Whitlow Group itself, a subtle jab at my father's own department, and finally, he blamed a fraudulent and aggressive new vendor that had infiltrated their system to plant false evidence, North Star Relief. Ms. Roth's only fault, the lawyer concluded, was in trusting the wrong people. She was trying to do too much, too fast, for the children. The board members, men and women who had known my father for decades, looked uncomfortable. They had a story they could use, a plausible out. I did not address the lawyer. I addressed the board. "I am glad Mr. Harris brought up the subject of trust," I said. My voice was calm and even, I placed my laptop on the table and connected it to the room's main video screen. The first image that appeared, filling the wall, was a high-resolution photograph from inside Warehouse 7. "This," I said, "is the lost medical pallet, serial number 4X-7721. I clicked. The screen changed. "This is the corresponding insurance claim for $200,000, citing total loss due to weather, filed by Ms. Roth's office and approved for payment." I clicked again. "This is the photograph Mateo took, time-stamped at 10:22 p.m. last night, showing the unbroken, untampered with North Star seal on that exact same pallet, inside Warehouse 7. I let the image hang in the air. The board members leaned forward. "And this," I said, "is a recording." I pressed play. The audio filled the sterile room, my own voice echoing. "Let me be clear. You are offering me a bribe, 40%. And then, Camille's voice, stripped of all its warmth. "Those are my cameras, you idiot! They record to my server." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Camille's lawyer was no longer looking smooth. He was staring at his notes. "And finally," I said, "this is the complete activity log from the independent, battery-operated, audio-visual recorder that Aria Bloom placed inside the warehouse yesterday afternoon. It recorded Ms. Roth's arrival, her bribe, and her explicit order to her private security team to get their phones, get everything. The evidence has been preserved." As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened. It was not a secretary. It was Julian Ryder. He was not Camille's friend. He was the city's compliance officer, and he was flanked by two men in dark suits. "Apologies for the intrusion. Graham, members of the board," Julian said, his voice formal, all warmth erased. "I am here to serve notice. As of 6 a.m. this morning, the City of Denver, in cooperation with the State Attorney General's office, is opening a formal criminal investigation into the Glass Lantern Fund, citing significant evidence of charitable fraud, wire fraud, and potential racketeering." Owen Park, who had been silent at the end of the table, his own laptop open, finally spoke. He addressed the board, not Camille. "To that point," Owen said, his voice the cold, precise instrument of a CFO, "I must add the findings of my own internal audit, which was triggered by the insurance lock I placed at 10:15 p.m. last night. The insurance fraud, which is extensive, was only the mechanism, the motive." Owen typed a command. The screen changed, overriding my photos. It was a flowchart, a simple, elegant, and devastating diagram. "Lantern Logistics LLC," Owen said, pointing. "A shell corporation, registered in Delaware, with a bank account in Clear Creek. It was funded by two sources: the insurance payouts for lost goods and the direct, untaxed revenue from the private resale of those same goods. The transfers from the Clear Creek account were then moved offshore." He zoomed in on the bottom of the chart, on the incorporation documents for the LLC. "We were unable to trace the owner until we discovered the digital signature used to execute the formation documents. It is an encrypted signature, one that is only issued to high-level city vendors." He looked, for the first time, directly at Camille. "It is Ms. Roth's signature. She linked herself, personally, to the theft. The loop is closed." Camille's lawyer looked at the screen, at the digital signature, and he slowly, very slowly, closed his leather briefcase. The head of the board, an older woman named Eleanor Vance, who had served with my father for 30 years, did not hesitate. "A vote is called," she said, her voice like gravel. "All those in favor of severing any and all contracts, partnerships, and financial ties with the Glass Lantern Fund, and requesting Ms. Roth's immediate and permanent resignation from all community and advisory committees associated with the Whitlow name." Every hand went up, even my father's. It was done. Camille's lawyer was whispering frantically in her ear. No doubt about the word racketeering. My father, who had been a silent statue since his opening statement, turned to me. The room was noisy with the scraping of chairs and the low murmurs of the board. but he spoke as if we were the only two people left. "Lauren," his voice was wrecked, a hollowed-out sound. I will sign whatever is needed to fix this." I had been waiting for this. I had the second folder ready. I slid it across the polished, reflective surface of the table, stopping it directly in front of him. "This isn't about fixing it, Dad," I said, my voice low. "This is about rebuilding." He opened it. It was not a resignation. It was a new contract, a binding corporate pledge. "It's a restitution fund," I explained, my voice clear and cold. "It commits Whitlow Transit to replace, at 150% value, every single dollar stolen or misdirected by the fund. It commits us to personally funding the actual delivery of all promised aid. And," I tapped the final page, "it will be administered by a new, independent, third-party oversight committee, the one that Julian Ryder and I will be co-chairing." He looked at me. He understood. Finally, this was not a pardon. It was a life sentence. It was accountability. In his own language. A binding, inescapable contract. "It was her!" Camille shrieked. She was on her feet, her lawyer unable to restrain her, her face a mask of mottled, desperate rage. "This was a setup, a conspiracy. She wanted the company. She wanted to destroy me." Her lawyer, in a final, desperate move, stood and threw a stack of printed emails onto the table. "We have evidence. An email, sent from Ms. Middleton's own North Star account, sent to my client, weeks ago, proposing a partnership to optimize the flow and manage the surplus. She was the mastermind." The board members hesitated. This was the one piece that didn't fit. They looked at the email, then at me. "That's a fabrication." The voice came from the doorway. Aria Bloom. She was not on the agenda, but she was here. She walked in, her own tablet in her hand, her eyes only for Camille. "I apologize, Mr. Harris," she said to the lawyer, "but as a former dispatch coordinator, I'm a stickler for metadata." She wirelessly connected her tablet to the screen, overriding Owen's chart. "That email you're holding," she said, "is real. It was sent from the North Star account, but I was curious about its origin." She brought up a screen full of code. The original email, the draft, was composed, saved, and edited on Ms. Roth's own office desktop. She sent it to herself from Lauren's compromised account, trying to create a paper trail, trying to frame her. She just forgot to wipe the metadata from the original draft. Checkmate. Camille looked at Aria, her face blank. She looked at the screen, at the digital proof of her own. Final, stupid mistake. She looked at her lawyer, who had sat down and was now staring at the ceiling. She made a small, choking sound, like a gasp, and for the first time, the true final mask of Camille Roth didn't just crack, it dissolved. She stumbled back, her hand fumbling for her chair, and she collapsed into it, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking in a dry, silent sob. It was the end. The lawyer asked for a recess. The board members, their faces grim, began to file out, their conversations already turning to damage control, to the press. My father was left alone at the table. He took a heavy gold pen from his pocket. He uncapped it, the sound loud in the quiet room. He straightened the restitution pledge, and he signed his name. I turned and walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look back. I walked through the hallways, past the whispering executives. I rode the elevator down, alone. The lobby was a war zone. Reporters, cameras, shouting. They swarmed me. A wall of lights and microphones. "Ms. Middleton, is it true?" "Lauren, what happens to the fund?" "Was your father involved?" I didn't stop. I kept walking, pushing through the glass doors. Just before I stepped out, I paused, and I said the only thing that mattered. From now on, the relief aid will get to where it needs to go. I pushed through the doors, out into the bright, cold morning. The sun was sharp, the air clean. I stopped on the pavement, feeling the light on my face. I pulled back the sleeve of my blazer. The bruise on my wrist, the one my father had ignored, the one Camille had inflicted, was still there. It was a dark, ugly, purple and black mark, a signature from the night before, a permanent, visible record. The final mask had fallen, and the system, at last, had been forced to change. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you can, please support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.